And so they might seem small, but they're a step ahead, and ahead is a good direction.
Absolutely.
And so they're not as small as you might think. And so you can pat yourself on the back, especially if you're depressed, a little harder than you might otherwise by saying, you say, well, this is trivial, but I did it. It's like, no, if you're moving ahead, tilting yourself forward in your metaphor, that's not small. You just keep doing that, you're going to get out of this paralyzed or retreat mode. And then God only knows what you're going to be able to do.
That's right. And I think that if people were to look at these neurological and psychological processes, because we're really talking about both, is as algorithms, right? These are algorithms that have been used by every animal. Think about the animal that's foraging for food. They go down one path, they're surprised they find food. They go down another path, they're sure they're on a scent. They are sure, and then they get nothing. Well, what happens? They learn to remember, they automatically remember everything that led to that failure. And people are very good at remembering that. Yep. But be good at remembering the things that led to successes and then ride those neurochemical waves to the next node of exploration. You're talking about exploration versus anxiety.
You can also do this with people in your environment. This is something B.F. Skinner pointed out when he was training animals. He said, you can use threat and punishment to train animals. But he said the most effective mode of training isn't that at all. You use sustained attention and reward. And so imagine that you're training a rat to climb up a ladder rung by rung and then do a little dance on the top and then climb down the other side. So what Skinner would do, his animals were hungry, by the way. They were starved to 75% of their body weight. So they were pretty dopaminergically motivated by the provision of any food. He would watch them wander around in the cage where a ladder was, let's say, a little rat monkey bar apparatus. And then when the rat would get near the ladder, he'd give it a food pellet. And so then it was soon spending a lot of time near the ladder. And now and then, while it was monkeying about, it would put one paw on the first rung. It was like food pellet. And then it would soon be doing that. And then sooner or later, it would put the next paw on and he'd reward it. And so Skinner trained pigeons to pilot guided missiles by pecking on photos in relationship to the ground they were watching. Right, so
spectacular.
He could use reward in an unbelievable... So one of the things you can do in your local environment and with yourself as well is you can watch people around you and you can see when they make small steps towards manifesting some behaviors you'd like to see a lot more of. And then you can tell them in this very differentiated, discriminatory manner, you can say, hey, look, here's the sequence of actions you just undertook. I saw that, I noted the process, and here's the delightful outcome. Good work. And man, if you do that repeatedly to people around you, and you don't want to do this in a fake or manipulative way, but if you're attentive to what people are doing that's good, and you mark that with a reward, man, you produce behavioral transformations at a rate that's just beyond belief.
I love it.
And everyone feels great about it too. Yeah, it's really a good habit, man. It's giving credit where, that's separating the wheat from the chaff in the truest sense. To give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, the behavior...
And you can imagine you're facilitating growth in the manner that you just described. And maybe neurological or genetic transformation. We didn't get to the gene expression part yet.
Yeah, the behaviorists like Skinner were truly brilliant. And I think one experiment that I think is worth mentioning, which is kind of speaks to the power of dopamine and why it's so vital to tap into these systems, even through menial tasks, and then to build on their self-amplifying mode so that you can take on bigger things in life, so to speak, positive goals, is there's a classic experiment now that's been done in humans and in animals where you take two rats, separate cages, or you could do this with humans where they're naturalistic conditions where one of the rats or humans actually has their dopamine depleted. In humans, this happens through Parkinsonian things or the ingestion of drugs which accidentally deplete the dopaminergic neurons. And what you find is that if you give them an opportunity to experience something pleasureful, like hit a lever and get a pellet of food, or people to access some very tasty food, both people with dopamine and with very depleted dopamine, animals with dopamine or without dopamine will eat the food. They will pursue the food, but only if it's right in front of them. If you put any kind of task between a person or an animal and a reward, what you find is that a rat won't move one rat's length to press a lever to get the food. So they are able to experience pleasure, but what they are unable to do is to embark on any kind of effort to achieve that pleasure.
Right, so that's so cool. So that means that in part what the dopamine system is doing, so imagine that the purpose of the dopamine system is to elicit a satiating reward. right, fundamentally. But then the satiating reward is something that has to be approached in steps.
That's right.
And so in order to maintain the motivation necessary to approach the satiating reward, you have to mark each of the steps with a marker of pleasure. And so the dopamine system is marking the intermediary steps. And then it's doing that to overcome the reluctance that you'd have to expend the energy in that micro routine that would otherwise be costly, by the fact that there's a net reward that's nested in the ultimate satiation.
That's right.
And parsing that out across the,
And sometimes people will experience tremendous anxiety in pursuit of their rewards. The social situation or the goal or the book, or, people imagine failure like crazy, as I'm sure, we've all heard and seen. Critical, again, is this cognitive appraisal, this interpretation of that. If you think of that anxiety as a natural system of getting you to move, of just biasing your body toward movement, toward action, as opposed to inaction, because that's what anxiety really is. It's a bias toward action. Then you can literally reshape the whole notion of what it feels like to have elevated heart rate, maybe trembling hands, maybe flushing of the face when one is doing public speaking. You do it enough times, you get pretty comfortable. Now, there are situations in life, I should just mention, such as sleep deprivation or in particular, that tend to make this whole set of systems with prefrontal cortex and limbic stuff and ACC and insula kind of dysregulated. It makes it harder to manage. That goes without saying, right? The quickest way to peel somebody apart is to sleep deprive them for 2 or 3 nights. One night, you're probably fine.
Right.
So, all the basics of self-care, of good nutrition, social connection, sleep, exercise, sunlight, those still apply. I just want to mention that. I want to make sure I answer your question about gene expression and permanent changes, because I've failed to do that thus far. One of the things that is absolutely key about the dopamine system is that it has a fast component. Dopamine is released, more adrenaline, aka epinephrine, can be released, and you can, this sort of upward spiral of energy and sort of success with the occasional drops, right? I mean, nobody succeeds in every task, right? Sometimes the phone rings or the doorbell rings and you fail. Goodness, you fail to clean the cup. You come home like, are you going to crash into a puddle of tears? No, you just clean it then and then put it away, right? Of course. But there's a slow system associated with achieving wins, even small wins. And that slow system is in the form of hormonal control that then translates to gene control. So 2 hormones in particular, testosterone and estrogen, which are present in both men and women, males and females, of course, but to varying degrees, are both secreted when the dopamine system is activated. This has to do with the relationship between dopaminergic neurons and the pituitary gland, which releases gonadotropins and luteinizing hormones, which then stimulate the testes and the ovaries, et cetera, to release the so-called sex steroid hormones.